Hello, everyone, and welcome to this edition of Purpose Amplified. I am your host, Ann Wynn, and there we go. I was like, there were a few things on the display that I didn't take care of yet. So thanks for tuning in, and wanted to just remind those who may be tuning in for the first time why I wanted to start this show. I have been very fortunate to come across a lot of purpose-driven ventures and individuals who have started their own ventures in helping to make an impact in our community and in our global community with the things that they do, whether it's their actions or through their own business or startups or a nonprofit organization. And they are amplifying their purpose in this world, hence the name Purpose Amplified for my show. And I'm super excited to have my guest on today, Federico Marques, who is the founder of Moonflower Farms. I'll have him on in just a second and ask him to share a little bit about himself. And if you guys are interested in sustainability and hydroponic farming, this is the show to definitely watch. If you are tuning in, thanks for joining us. Feel free to drop a comment or a question as we go along in our conversation. And without further ado, I'm going to bring Federico onto the stage. Good morning.
Good morning, Ann. Good to see you.
It's good to see you. And you and I have been fortunate enough, I should say, to have been able to see you a few times in the last month or so. Lots of exciting things going on with Moonflower. And to start off, I'd love for you to just share briefly a little bit about who you are and your background.
Sure. Hey, I'm Federico Marques. I'm the CEO and founder of Moonflower Farms. Little background, I grew up in Texas, graduated from University of Houston, got a tennis scholarship. And started working at Bayer many years ago as an intern. And during that period of time, it was on a fluke, but I came across an interesting NASA article. And while I was still an intern, I visited Stennis Space Center in the early 90s they were doing research there on bioregenerative life support systems for advanced manned spaceflight.
Oh my gosh, say that 5 times fast.
Yeah, it was a long title, but ironically, their budget just got cut, so they were out of a job. And I showed up, and they said, "Hey, you got us for 6 months. What do you want to know?" That was my introduction to hydroponics. That's when I was watching, and they actually had a moon base that they were building that would house 4 astronauts, and I got to walk in it, and I got a tremendous amount of information, and I had a great relationship with all of those individual scientists. And the irony was that was how I learned about hydroponics, with cleaning air, cleaning water, and growing food. Mm-hmm. Mostly cleaning air and water. That was my strong interest then.
Right. And not really as a food source, but more, like you said, clean air. So that was really interesting. And for those who may not be familiar with what exactly hydroponics is, would you share, just a brief description of what that means?
Yeah, hydroponics, it's the words mean to work with water. Essentially, it's growing plants without soil. Either you water them directly and they grow in the water, pretty much like you would have a little cutting and put in water and it starts to sprout roots and grow. Or you have a media like a pumice, a stone, vermiculite, sand, plastic. I mean, plants' roots, if you give them a good substrate, they can grow on pretty much anything. But you don't use soil for a variety of reasons. But mostly the soil-borne pathogens and some other issues in the soil.
Well, if we're going to be on the moon or at the space station, we wouldn't really have soil to grow these produce, vegetables, plants anyway, right?
Right.
And that's probably a big reason why NASA invested in research and initiatives for hydroponics, I imagine.
Absolutely. The model, I mean, for example, planet Earth is essentially a spaceship traveling through space. And if it was not for plants, everything would die. So it's the plants that help provide oxygen, clean the air, clean the water, sustain life through growing food, and it's an essential part of the whole food chain. So you have to have it. And if you're going to go into space, you cannot be hauling tons of water and tons of food and tons of other things. So they were focused on bioregenerative systems, you go in with a certain amount of water and you can use it over and over and over again, recapture it, so you don't waste anything. And the same thing with cleaning the air. A lot of the research that you've probably heard about plants and how they help clean the air, that all came from NASA. It came from Stennis Space Center. I did a lot of that research, but all that came from Stennis Space Center in the 90s, and then it got popularized a couple of decades after that. So it was looking at self-cleaning systems using hydroponics, and that's why NASA was so interested in it.
Oh, absolutely. Now, of course, this is going to make everybody remember their high school science and biology, right? Like, and about plants and that whole cycle. What was that? The Krebs cycle, I think it's called.
Yeah.
Shout out to my science teacher from high school. I remember that piece of it. So, here's where you had an opportunity to pique that interest in hydroponics because of your work at Bayer. And so, fast forward and help us figure out and learn more about what you decided to do with that knowledge about hydroponics. And there was a reason, a very personal reason for this.
Yeah, I mean, really it was just, like I said, it was a bit of a fluke. I was working at Bayer as an intern. And and I did one summer there, and that was great. And then I came back the next summer and I was working there, and I was actually thinking about getting a job there because they wanted me to stay on.
Yeah.
And before I went to grad school, so I was still in college. Anyway, all of a sudden I started getting really bad allergies, and they would not go away. And it was weird because, I play tennis, I'm very active, I'm super fit, and all of a sudden I'm sick all the time.
Yeah.
And I got a cold that doesn't go away. And it's like, man, it's been 6 months. And I go see a doctor. I never go see doctors, but I go see a doctor. And they're like, yeah, seasonal allergies, that's this and that. And they gave me, Claritin and Hismanol and all this stuff. Did not do anything. I was like popping these pills for the next 3 months. Nothing. So I do what I normally do when I'm under stress. I go to the library and I start reading books. And I came across an article about Stennis Space Center and what they were doing at NASA, and how they were, when they first started going into the space research and space exploration, they quarantined astronauts because they had symptoms that were exactly the symptoms that I had. So I was like, whoa, what's going on here? I know those symptoms.
Yeah.
That's interesting. And I started reading more about it. And that's when I decided I'm just going to take a road trip to NASA. I'm going to go visit Stennis Space Center. So that's why I went. I mean, you're young, you got time.
Of course.
And that's when I really started learning a lot. But my primary mission when I went to NASA was like, okay, what did they do? What did they learn about this? Because I've been sick for almost a year now. It's not going away. And bottom line is, they said, when you're in a sealed capsule and you're traveling, you off gas. There's a lot of off gassing. They did not know back in the 70s how bad the off gassing was in those things, and especially not in the 60s or 70s. So then he started analyzing and said it's essentially sick building syndrome, but in a capsule.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, so the off gassing of polymers and plastics and formaldehyde, even your bad breath or your deodorant or your colognes or your smoker bioeffluents. I mean, all these things there's no place to go. Picture your new office building and there's no windows to open anymore.
Yeah.
And you go to schools, you can't open the windows anymore. So that air is constantly circulating over and over. And I said, that's it. And then working with some of those scientists, they recommended certain plants and certain things. And that's what really got me interested in hydroponics, or cleaning water and air, but primarily air.
Yeah. No, that's really interesting. And using the analogy of the sick building, and I'm thinking about my own experience. You're right. I when I moved back to Houston, I worked in a building that was very old, probably had not had a lot of asbestos removed. And my allergies were horrendous. I was sick so often and going to the doctor so often for steroid shots, and he was like, I can't give you any more steroid shots. And that makes a lot of sense. But, where did that kind of shift in your thinking about clean air and clean water go to, hey, this is sustainable farming where you could produce, vegetables and other things that people could live on?
Yeah, it's kind of ironic because that same know-how, that's how I built my first greenhouse. My first hydroponic greenhouse was actually at Bayer, and I used it to build a system to clean industrial wastewater. Everybody thought it was nuts. So I'm in a chemical plant and I'm building a greenhouse in a chemical plant to run industrial wastewater through it. And they just thought that was crazy. Anyway, that helped my career at Bayer, and I had a really strong career. That project succeeded, and I had other projects that succeeded. So after a period of time, and I kept doing the research, I decided in 2006 to leave Bayer to pursue this, become an entrepreneur. Let's put it that way. I had a lot of research done. I had patents, and it was like, my wife said, look, if you don't do it now, you're never going to do it. Might as well be an entrepreneur. And I was mostly focused on cleaning air. And it was because during that time, we just had kids and my wife was diagnosed with celiac disease.
Yeah.
And I'm like, celiac, what the heck is that? You know, and I never heard the word gluten before or celiac or all this stuff. So all of a sudden I'm getting up to speed. I'm being re-educated. It's like, okay. And it took about a year before they finally gave her the diagnosis of like, it's a dietary change. There's nutritional deficiencies. And vitamin D deficient. I mean, so it was just a lot of information. And we moved back to Houston and I said, okay. And we could not go anywhere to eat. We would go and we would start saying, well, she's got allergies, and they would all look at you like you're funny. Yeah, well, she can't eat this. And it's gluten, and they had no clue what kind of, we were like Martians, you know, it's like, who are these aliens? So for a period of time, we had no way to eat. I wanted organic food. There was nothing there. Yeah. So long story short, I wrote a business plan for a restaurant that could actually cater to people, so you didn't have to live in Whole Foods all the time. And I wasn't even going to do it. I was just going to consult and try to shop it around. But a year later, we had raised the funds, and now we're building a restaurant chain to do all that. And that's when I started learning more about the food industry and how inefficient the food industry was. And since I already knew about hydroponics, I said, hey, what the heck? Let's start growing some crops behind the restaurant. So that's when I started doing hydroponics for food production, not cleaning air and water, which I was still doing, but really for food production, because that was fairly new to me. Anyway, built a successful chain, got it going. And then in 2016, there was a lot of buzz about vertical farming. And I said, you know, there's a lot of hype there, but what's the reality? And then I decided, all right, I'm going to transition away from the restaurant industry to focus on hydroponics for food, and maybe really take a close look at vertical farming, but other types of hydroponic farming. And that's really when I said, because this industry is so inefficient, just the amount of water that's used, the amount of land that's used, the transport, you know, it's 1,800 miles just to get from farm to table in the US alone. It's getting worse because of climate change. So that's when I pivoted and said, let's take a close look at this. Let's start a business and really focus on how do we scale sustainable city farming that you can go pretty much anywhere in the US or the world to solve these major problems.
Yeah. So you took a solution that was being used for something else, clean air, clean water, and helped to hopefully essentially solve a food issue in the future, right? And people, these are a lot of things that people are looking at. As you mentioned, celiac and going gluten-free has become people are more informed about those issues, those health issues and dietary issues now than they were in 2006. And so people are looking for options that would help them with their dietary needs. And there are a lot of autoimmune diseases where, you know, having, less inflammatory food sources could help them as well. And so I think this is a great time for your shift. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
Yeah, even like for me, it was an education because I knew a lot about the hydroponics part. I did not know about the nutrition part. So I was learning that. We were very fortunate too. We started meeting with some folks at University of Houston, at Prairie View, Rice, but really we were having some good discussions with MD Anderson. MD Anderson came to us as we were doing stuff, and they were very interested in our microgreens and microgreen research. And they're the ones who were telling me, and also by the way, the other interesting tidbit I forgot to mention is when I was working on the business plan for Moonflower, I still had my colleagues at NASA, and I was talking to them, and they said, "Yeah, our budget got approved for space exploration. We're planning on having a lunar colony by 2025, 30 at the latest." And I told them I was doing hydroponics and I was looking at food production. I said, "Hey, maybe you can help us put flowers on the moon."
Yeah.
And my wife was calling, "Okay, call it Moonflower."
Oh, there you go. Perfect.
So that's where we got the name Moonflower, was from the guys at my colleagues at NASA going, "Hey, you can help us put flowers on the moon." And by the way, we are still working closely with our NASA guys to put flowers on the moon this decade. So that's part of our crazy plan, is to make that happen this decade.
That would be phenomenal. But, their plant of 2025, that's only 2 years away, right?
Yeah.
But essentially, yes, if the plan is to have some kind of space station on the moon, or as we continue exploring other planets, we don't know what the climate is going to be like. So there has to be a way to grow nutritional food or flowers. And I think you've come across this technology, for lack of a better word, and really it is a technology to do this successfully. One of the things that really piqued my interest when you were talking about hydroponics was that you have a whole entire system that goes through, and the water brings the nutrients and everything to the roots of the plants. Because we often think, oh, it's got to be in the soil for these nutrients, but that's not the case.
Yeah, no, not at all. In fact, the roots are essentially, you can use a media if you want to, but you don't have to. In our case, we use a little Oasis cube. It could be a little Rockwool cube. But once the roots get going, you're just keeping them moist all the time. And everything is closed loop, so you use substantially less water. On average, it's 90% less water to provide the same crops. So it's constantly being reused. And that right now, with some of the water issues that we're facing, that's why I got so interested in doing this, because when I started looking at it in 2016, 2017, I'm like, if you do this right, this solves so many problems, not just locally or nationally, but also worldwide.
Absolutely.
So, but we actually capture rainwater at our farm, and we use that. Of course, it hadn't rained in Houston in the last 4 months.
I was going to say, it hasn't rained in a while.
Yeah, but meanwhile, we still use very, very little water to grow the crops that we grow.
That's amazing. So water conservation, being able to grow in areas that you would not think that the soil is good for crops. It also, even thinking about traditional farming now, the farmers have to go through and trade out crops in the fields, right? Like they can't grow corn in the same area each year because of the nutrients that are needed, and it's sapped the soil of these nutrients. That kind of answers those problems. Being in a greenhouse, you don't have to worry about weather. You don't have to worry about pests. So no pesticides that are used on the plants.
Correct. Yeah, even MD Anderson, I did not know this, but MD Anderson told me that about 70% of everything you buy in a grocery store, all produce, they have pesticide residue. And and some of them have systemic pesticide residue, which means you cannot rinse it off. It's actually entrained in the produce itself. So I did not know that, and that's why they were very interested in the products that we were growing for some of their patients.
Yeah.
So that's a big issue, and it's getting worse with climate change. You're seeing more pests because of the heat. So I'm pretty sure the number is probably closer to 80% now.
Yeah. That is definitely, I had no idea either about that. So, and of course it would, MD Anderson would be researching this, because I'm sure these pesticides and other chemicals that we introduce to our foods are possibly linked to, cancers as well. So that is definitely an interesting fact to bring up. So right now on your farm, which is in Houston, I got to visit. I hope to return soon and get to visit to tour the greenhouse, actually. So your facility is how many square footage right now, and what's your goal in the future for?
Right now, we're on 5 acres, but we have a 20,000 square foot hydroponic greenhouse. With that hydroponic greenhouse, we currently produce about 1,000 heads of lettuce a week. but we think we can go up to 2,000 in the same footprint. We need to update some of the technology that we have. But so that's what we're working on. But really, the big thing for us is we continue to work with MD Anderson and Baylor College of Medicine. And we've had a lot of strong interest from schools. During COVID, I mean, COVID was a very rough time. As you can imagine, every single contract we had with restaurants and bars and distributors, everything disappeared almost overnight. Literally, the month that we were going to have our grand opening for our facility, everything shut down. So life got rough, but since then we've been approached by a lot of different schools, and they've been looking at training. I mean, I'm super surprised at how many students. We've probably had about 100 interns from local high schools and universities. So we're working very closely with schools to help them build their own growing systems and probably their own farms.
Yeah,
So
I'm not really surprised about that when you mentioned the schools being interested, because this is essentially a technology that is a future technology that's happening now, but you want to expand it, and schools are looking for programs that are future and forward thinking. And so it doesn't really surprise me that you've been approached. Plus, you're probably one of a handful of people who have the knowledge for this technology to grow, to create a a greenhouse, a hydroponic greenhouse, and farm produce, vegetables, whatever it is that you'll be farming, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I mean, you're seeing a lot more worldwide adoption of the technology. Once again, it solves a lot of problems. Areas are getting drier, heat is getting worse, water is becoming more scarce. So now people are looking at it and going, whoa, hey, this is a good technology. I'll give you another example. In 2007, when Hurricane Harvey hit Houston, all these farms outside of Houston were wiped out and flooded.
Yeah.
We were featured in the Atlantic Monthly because our farm, we couldn't reach it for 4 days, but it was vertical and it was enclosed. There was no power. But when we went in there, it was like a forest. Everything was growing. It was crazy. It was
wow.
So we lost a little power, but not all the power. And so they were showcasing that. And the only problem is we had plenty of food, but all the restaurants and all of our customers were closed.
Yeah, no one was open to be able to use the food.
No one was open. And then a couple of years ago, we had that major freeze in Texas.
Yeah.
Terrible freeze. And once again, every farm outside of Houston was just frozen solid shut.
Yeah.
We were unaffected. And they sent a camera crew from a local TV station, and they're just panning around going, oh my gosh, there's lettuce everywhere. And they got chard, and they got basil, and they got crops everywhere. And they were just shocked. I mean, of course, I had to live there for 4 days, but but we had product, and everything in there was sold out the next week. But you know, that kind of resiliency is going to be needed as we move forward, and we're having more climate issues. So
yeah, absolutely. And you know, climate issues aside, I mean, definitely something to be concerned about, but thinking about the areas even in Houston that we consider food deserts,
yes,
where it's difficult for people to access healthy food because of there's no stores nearby. I mean, this could be a cooperative farming venture where people could come and grow their own produce, which would hopefully essentially help health issues and things like that. And even thinking globally, think about the areas that are arid and deserts and you can't really grow anything and there's famine. I mean, this is definitely sustainable. Almost seems like it's an understatement for hydroponic farming.
This is, in my opinion, hydroponic farming is synonymous with sustainable. Period. It just solves too many problems with there's no pesticide residue. I mean, there's no pesticide. It's biological. It's all integrated pest management. You use 1/6 the amount of fertilizer. There is no fertilizer runoff. You're not worried about phosphate going into the stormwater or going into your river or creek. Everything's closed loop. The amount of water is much less. You get on average 20 to 30 times more yield per square foot. The other thing, too, that our MD Anderson colleagues and Baylor colleagues shared with us is, and that I did not know about, like I said, I'm always learning something new.
Of course.
They said, because of the long distances, once you harvest something, it immediately starts to lose nutritional value. So it could be 3 or 4 or 5 days before you get it. And by then, on average, every day is 10% lost. So, and that's 10% of, like, it could be your vitamin C or your vitamin A, your vitamin K, folic acid, etc. I mean, in some cases, you might not have any vitamin C left or very little. But and more importantly, they said the cancer-fighting antioxidants and phytochemicals, they're usually gone in 24 to 48 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
That
you
is
can't freeze
definitely
them. Yeah, they're
true.
gone.
That's definitely interesting. And that shorter time to market helps you not it helps you to be able to have more nutritional
Correct.
value in your produce. Or, I mean, is there a way to, as you get it to, obviously you have to harvest the crop. So
Yes.
would you be able to keep it in some type of hydroponic solution as it goes to market, or is that going to be
No, you
a
can.
technology that still has to be developed?
No, we're actually doing that right now. For example, we're in 20 Kroger locations
Uh-huh.
in the Houston market. And what we did was we would actually grow it. And so it's got 100% full nutrition. And then we would deliver it live. And then we had these display units that we now have. And by the way, we're building some new display units for schools right now called Moon Pods. But this way they have it in there and it's completely live. So that way when they purchase it or they take it home, they can eat it that day. It's still live and growing, whether it's herbs or microgreens or lettuces, different lettuces, other leafy greens.
Yeah.
So I think the future is going to be live.
Okay.
That's the highest nutritional value you can get.
Oh, absolutely. No, that's amazing. And then what, these moon pods, as you call it, you take it home, are they recyclable, or is it something that they could then return to you in some kind of program that you could continue to use? I'm thinking of the Nespresso pods, right? They allow you
Yeah.
to send it back to them.
Well, right now we're testing this with in some groceries, but mostly in schools. We're testing one in Pearland, actually not Pearland, Alvin ISD. There's a Shadow Creek High School. We're testing one, but we're going to be testing it in a couple of other schools and getting feedback. And by the way, the students are running it. There's usually a couple of clever students.
Awesome. Yeah.
And in that way, they produce it and say, yeah, this is good. Once we get enough feedback and development on that, then we plan on having a consumer unit that you can have. Yeah. So that's probably about a year away. But right now, it's mostly in education as students are learning how to do their own thing in schools.
That's amazing that you've got these programs in schools and the kids are already learning. The students, I should say, they're learning this, and this is, like I said, it's the technology of the future. Now you have your own plans. Excuse me. You mentioned, you're 5 acres right now, 20,000 square foot greenhouse, but you're only able to produce so much in this 20,000 square foot. Even though you mentioned 1,000 heads of lettuce, that's just feeds a very small portion of people here in Houston. So, what are your plans for expansion?
Right now, we're planning on building another greenhouse. We're on 5 acres, and we're only using 2.
You have 3 acres left.
That's right. So right now, we have to expand anyway because we have more demand than we can produce on our. That's why we're trying to upgrade our current facility and see what we can do to maximize it.
Yeah.
So that's part of our plan, is to try to probably quadruple our production in our current facility. I think we can do it with new technology and a new setup, but we're also going to build a separate greenhouse, a smaller greenhouse, to showcase some of the new technology that we've been working on.
Yeah, that would be very cool.
And then we're going to start training folks, because we have a lot of, mostly students. It's weird. These schools are coming to us, and we're going to provide a training and certification program for them. So we're working with Prairie View A&M to develop that right now at our facility. And our goal is to roll that out in Q2 next year.
Oh, that's awesome. And so, in order to expand, obviously you are looking for some capital, some venture capitalists possibly. Yeah,
we actually have a great lead investor, and she's awesome. She's from Naples, Florida, and she loves everything that we're doing, and she knows the education market, which she's really tied together. But yeah, we're currently doing our pre-seed round. We're doing a $1.5 million raise for pre-seed.
That's awesome.
And we think that in 2 years, we might be doing a $5 million raise for seed round. We may not have to go beyond seed, but we'll see. We have to see where we're at. But right now, that's what we're doing, is our pre-seed round.
No, that's phenomenal. And so everybody go to check out Moonflower Farms, follow them so that you can continue to get information about the pre-seed round if you are out there as a venture capitalist and an investor and are interested in learning more about that. I'm sure Federico is open to having conversations
Sure.
with you as well, so feel free to connect with him on LinkedIn also. Now you had a very or have a very interesting idea moving forward too, because you mentioned that so many schools were interested in your program, and the students are working on these programs now. So how are you going to take that interest and parlay it into, what you're thinking of for the future, what you're planning for the future?
Here's where it gets interesting. In order to have a technology that can scale, really scale, become the new standard. Right now, the standard is farms far, far away, traveling, growing tons of product, and probably a third of it gets wasted. The rest has to get transported thousands of miles to the end user. So the goal is to build a hyper-local network.
Uh-huh.
And this hyper-local network are a bunch of smaller farms producing a lot of volume together. And the three biggest costs for a lot of these farms are labor, electricity, and water, or labor, power, and water. So our goal has been really to focus on bringing that down as much as possible. The beauty of the students is they want to work the farms. And for example, I could have a 20,000 square foot facility that only needs 2.5 people to run it.
Wow.
And not only that, but they would be students. They would be high school students. So some of the farms that we're talking to a couple of schools in Houston about building these smaller farms where they can get trained, educated, they get certified. We provide certified training. Right now, Texas also on the Texas board is looking to adopt this new training, and we're working with Prairie View and some others to make that happen. So by 2025, that should be an approved curriculum, because right now there is no hydroponics training, no solar training, no sustainability training, nothing about this new technology that's growing rapidly.
Yeah.
So we're going to fill that void. And then we're going to have high school students that are running their own farms. And when they do that, they may actually be getting paid to be in high school and run the farm.
And run farms and learning a very, very viable and sought after skill and having that experience as well.
And then what makes it even more interesting is that the basics, that knowledge of hydroponics, and we will be touching on solar and water reclamation and water treatment and some other things that are part of that. But once they get that basic training, we're going to be introducing them to NASA, because guess what? NASA needs hydroponic experts. And when they go to lunar and Mars exploration missions, you need bioregenerative systems. So our students would be 80% ready to go to the next level.
That is truly inspiring and awesome. You're not only working on a solution that helps to address the food shortage in the world globally, but you are helping the next generation find work. You're helping the next generation go work for NASA, help us populate on the moon, in the space station. So that truly is amazing. It's just, it all came from, one little thing. You're the seed where you were looking for something that was natural and really your interest in hydroponics. So it's amazing. And this is why I love talking to people like you, because it was just a little seed of an idea that became something big, became a movement essentially, and really amplifying your purpose.
Yeah, no, like I said, it started with a bad allergy that wouldn't go away. That led me to NASA. But when I got to walk that NASA biohome, and I'm like, wow, you're going to have 4 astronauts living in that. And I'm like walking in it, and they're showing me all the technology that's in there. And they say, yeah, this is where all the wastewater goes. And here's the sink. And here are the 4 beds where the astronauts live on. And I can envision it being on the moon with this. And here's how we clean the air. And this is how we clean the water. And this is where we're growing food. I was like, I think I was like 21 years old. Yeah. And I was like, wow, this is so cool. I want to learn more. I want to learn everything. So that was the inspiration. It all started at NASA, and now again, full circle, I'm back at NASA, and hopefully this like I said, this decade we'll be putting flowers on the moon.
That would be awesome. That would definitely be awesome. Again, if you would like to learn more about Moonflower Farms and connect with them, moonflowerfarms.com. Very easy to remember URL. And I think you have you've got some different social media channels and things as well. So if you want to stay up to date with what's going on with Federico and Moonflower, and then absolutely, of course, as you're going to pre-seed and hopefully seed round for funding to help expand your ventures, there will be those out there who are interested in learning more about those initiatives as well. This has been a phenomenal conversation. Every time I talk to you, the time just flies by because it's so interesting. And I know, even though I've talked to you several times about this, I'm always learning something new each conversation that I was like, oh, I didn't remember about that, or that piece of technology is something I finally can grasp my head
Oh yeah.
hands around, right? Like understand it to work it better. And so it truly is amazing work that you're doing. And I cannot wait to see what continues to happen. And, of course, more success to you. And hopefully, you'll be able to expand sooner rather than later. Because as you said, you've got a list of customers who want to buy from you. So we want to be able to go to these grocery stores and buy that produce.
Yeah. Right now we do have a tremendous amount of demand, and we're trying to that's why we're doing the pre-seed. We got to move quickly to fill that. We also have a lot of IP that we got to protect as well. So there's another issue.
Yes.
But right now, next time you come to the farm, I got a lot. You're going to have a very cool show and tell, because there's some tech that I have not shown anybody, and I can kind of give you a little show of what we're working on.
Well, I'll be back in Houston in a few weeks, so I'm going to take you up on that.
Absolutely.
Would love to see it. But thank you so much for your time today, Federico. I know that your day is just completely, busy and scheduled out, and I really appreciate you taking the time to share with the audience more about hydroponic farming, more about Moonflower Farms, and your mission to help us have this technology, help us continue to have sustainable farming, clean air and clean water as well, and really a source of learning for students. I mean, you've checked a lot of boxes there, my friend.
Yeah, did not expect that. Like I said, COVID kind of forced our hand, and hey, when the schools started calling, we're like, okay, we got to pay attention, because now we're at 10 schools calling us. What's going on? It was very interesting.
Definitely very interesting. Well, COVID, I think, uncovered a lot of opportunities and things for many of us, and I'm glad it was something worthwhile for you. And again, thank you for your time today and being on the show and sharing more about Moonflower Farms. Thanks for everyone tuning in. If you're catching the video replay, please feel free to drop a comment or question. Definitely, I encourage you to go learn more about Moonflower Farms on their website. And then, of course, feel free to connect with Federico as well on LinkedIn. I've tagged you on most of the posts, so that should be an easy way to find him on LinkedIn. And until the next time, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Continue to move around, get out there and find what your purpose is, and possibly a way to amplify it. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Ann.